Oh, hi. Are you stuck at home trying to figure out what you're going to eat with the food that you have in your house? Well, I'm here to help you because we're doing quarantine cuisine. So our meal today we're going to be doing is it's called chicken flatbread. That's right. It's very fancy, very easy to make. Some people might think it's difficult, but I don't think it's very difficult. Only a few steps and you don't need many things. Come on over to the freezer. First step in your chicken flatbread is getting a frozen chicken flatbread. Then you take the frozen chicken flatbread, you unwrap it, and then you take and you put it on a plate. Just like this. Okay, we put it right here. Then you take the plate, you put it in. Now some people like to cover it so that it doesn't splatter all over. Put the chicken flatbread in the microwave. And then you turn it on for 1 second. 1 minute. Excuse me, 1 minute. Then you take the lemon and you put it in the mixer. And then you turn the mixer on. Now we don't have time for this to finish baking. So we've pre-made one for you. Fresh, right out the microwave. Then all you gotta do is take a bite. Tastes like mass production. Welcome to the Edge stream. We miss you. Like, seriously, we miss you guys.
Like, what are we even doing here? What are we here for?
I don't really know. Like, seriously, I think I'm starting to hallucinate from not being able to talk or see very many people.
Nobody is around. In other news, Michael had a meeting on Zoom the other day for 20 minutes that featured himself, 2 sock puppets, and a bag of flour with the face of Owen Wallach stuck to it.
Yeah, if he would just answer his text messages once in a while, we wouldn't have to worry about that. Just kidding. It's not like you watch this anyway. Thanks, Owen. So, by the way, pray for Kelsey, because right now she is stuck at home with 2 preschoolers, and like we don't even know where she went or what happened to her.
Yeah. Seriously, pray for her. Take a moment. If you're here, we are glad that you're joining us on this stream right now. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe this video so that way you're up to date with the other stuff that we're posting. We're posting stuff pretty darn often, and it's not just us, it's not just us staff, but it includes you guys too, so make sure you check it out.
Yeah, and if you have ideas along the way, pass them on. A lot of our funny stuff have actually come from students because you guys are way funnier than we are. So if you have ideas, let us know. Here's a weekend update. Hi, my name is Hunter Spano, and I'm here to bring you your weekend update. I sound like a robot. The cow from last week's episode has actually escaped custody once again. It is now causing chaos on a Virginia highway. The authorities are calling him the Great Moodini and have no clue what his real intentions are. Another survey has showed that 12% of workers skip video meetings due to lack of clothes. So this is why Michael has been on none of his meetings for the past 3 weeks. A lottery-winning farmer has shared a lot of his potatoes with other unfortunate people stuck in isolation due to the Ohio gnome outbreak. Nobody likes you, Ohio. In other news, an Italian priest accidentally live-streamed Mass with Facebook filters active. The funny thing is, he had no clue that these Facebook filters were active while giving a serious talk on God, Bible, and what we should do during these trying times. He was a wizard. Harry. A French athlete whose racing plans were foiled by the gnome outbreak held his own marathon on his 23-foot-long balcony this past weekend. And honestly, it's pretty impressive because, the only marathon I've run was down from my bed to my fridge and back again. There's a website that can calculate how long you'll last with the toilet paper you have. I'm Hunter Spano, and this has been your weekend update. What does PEMDAS actually stand for?
Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, adding, subtracting.
Oh wow, that's impressive. Good job. You got it. I need 5 Disney princesses.
Belle, Rapunzel, Tiara, Elsa, Tiana,
Yeah.
Ariel.
Okay, good. No, that's like... Yep, I do. Got it right there. What are the 5 professional sports teams in Michigan?
Okay, hey, 1 second. Basketball.
No.
Teams.
Lions, Tigers, Red Wings.
Pistons.
Yeah.
And then what's another sport? Not soccer.
Well, I mean, technically there's only 4, but I like to say there's a 5th one. There's a team that's dear to my heart that's semi-pro but fully pro to me.
Oh, is it the Flint one?
Yeah, what's their names?
Oh, Firebird.
There you go. Who's the most annoying person in your house right now? There are 8 states that begin with the letter M. I need 4 of them.
Mississippi, Massachusetts, Missouri.
Yeah.
Oh. Think of wait. There's 8? Michigan. Oh. Yeah.
Good
Keep
job.
going.
So, tell me something that you've learned or thought about God in these last 2 weeks.
Okay, I've been seeing that verse go around on like Instagram that's like talks about, or it's like God talking about like a plague or a pandemic or something, and it's like, it says something about like if the people stop doing like evil things, it'll go away. And I was just wondering, like, is that out of context? Because I feel like this isn't a punishment.
Completely.
Yeah.
That is completely out of context.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been saying that, which I'm like, that's a weird thing to,
I know,
like,
right?
for knowing who Jesus is and then hearing people say that, yeah, no, like, what kind of person says, I want you to love me, so I'm going to hurt people?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we would never attach that as a positive thing to any human. Why would we do that to God? I don't know. What do you love most about your family time right now?
I don't know. We've been watching a lot of like TV shows together, so I just like that bonding time. I also like that it's like forcing us to eat dinner together. Like some days it would get too hectic and we would like just eat at different times.
Yeah.
So I like that, yeah.
Cool. Next question. What are you grateful for today?
My family, of course.
He said, me.
My mom made some really good bran muffins in the house.
Oh, bran
those are
muffins.
really good. Every night we have like cake night. We have like a bundt cake.
Every night is cake night.
We have a bundt cake, and it's so good. And so every night we have cake.
Like you make a
Sometimes we
new
play
cake?
games. No, we just buy it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We play games and stuff, which is fun.
And eat bundt cake.
And yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. That's
It's
good.
fun, yeah.
Good. So because you won, I have a prize for you. And I don't have any more toilet paper. I couldn't find it anywhere. But I have the next best thing. They are flushable butt wipes. Okay, so there you go. All right, so use sparingly. That is worth a lot of money to some people. Today we're talking about sin and separation, and we asked some of you, our students, to tell us about a time that you did something that you got in trouble for that was either funny or not so funny.
When I was younger, I got in big trouble for running my sister over with our toy Barbie Jeep.
I was trying to get on it and she didn't want me on, so she ran me over.
Sorry.
When I was 8 years old, I peed my pants in front of my entire family in a restaurant on Mother's Day, and my dad put me in a garbage bag and took me home.
So when you think of this word sin, what comes to your mind? I think sometimes we tend to make out sin to be this like dark and mysterious thing, like some kind of like cosmic glitter that gets on us and we can't shake it, at all once we've done something wrong. But actually, what it is it's a gap. Sin is a gap. And if you caught our the episode of the show this week, we talked a little bit about that, but it's missing the mark. So there's this ideal, a way we're supposed to live, a way we're supposed to respond to people, and then there's where we actually land. And that there's a distance that gets created between what's ideal and what we do. And that distance is usually created by our poor choices or our selfish choices, or even sometimes choices that we make and we don't really understand them fully, but when we make them. But there's a gap that's created between who we are and who we're meant to be, right? Or also between us and who we've wronged, or even with people who we messed up with. See, when we stray away from what is good, for the things we were created to live for, that bring life, bring joy, bring love to other people. When we stray away from that, there is a gap that is created. Kind of like maybe when we send that text message or post that video that we didn't really want to, and it can end up separating our view of ourselves from our true value. Or maybe we lose patience and we call our sibling a really harsh name because they annoyed us, and in return they start avoiding us because there's a gap that's created. Or maybe we break a family rule and we lose some trust from our parents. Or maybe we carefully exclude somebody from our circle, from like a hangout or a group meet or a chat online, but we're a little less careful. Actually, we're pretty careless about posting that and showing everyone else that they weren't included. Or maybe sometimes we'll say something, or I'll say something out of earshot when somebody's not around, something I would never have the courage to say to their face. So when we make those decisions that are against what is right, what is good, the ideal, then that gap between what we should and what we do is called sin. Another way of saying it is that we miss the mark, which, by the way, when people talk about sinning against God, this is what they mean. There is a way He intends for us to live in any situation, and then we sin when we miss that. So that's the gap that's created. So the question is, when that gap is created, how do we right that wrong? Can we even do that? Can we right that wrong? And what do we do with that gap? And what I find is that if that gap doesn't get corrected, it will fill itself. Like, that gap will fill itself, but usually not in a way that's helpful. Quite often, that gap will fill itself with fear or guilt or shame. I think of myself when I was in my late middle school to early high school years. I really struggled with anger. I had a lot of anger issues from things that were unresolved in my life growing up. And I ended up taking that anger out on other people. When I was at school, I would take it out on my teachers with my sarcasm. When I was around other students, I would take it out on them by saying things about them behind their back, or I would have rumors, or I would use mean words about them. And then when I was home, I would take it out on my siblings with terrible insults when no other adults were around. And whenever I did that, I felt awful. I felt terrible that I would do that, and that guilt actually would build up when my anger would go away. So, but then I was afraid of letting my mom know how I was treating other people, and then on top of that, there was this shame that really crept in and led me to believe lies about myself and about other people and about my family members, and you see, that gap was created. And it wasn't fixed. And what filled it in? Fear. I was afraid of telling my mom. Shame. I thought poorly of myself and other people. And guilt. I knew what I had done. So what do we do? What do we do when those things start to creep in? We actually try to fill that gap on our own. I think by nature we tend to do that, to try to push out the shame, the fear, and the guilt. And I think there's three main ways that we can try to fill that gap on our own. I think the first one is distractions. We fill our time. We have we fill up our schedule so we don't have to think about the things where we messed up in life. And but as this quarantine is showing us, right, eventually the quiet will come because we can't control every part of our lives. We can't distract ourselves all of the time. And I think the second thing that we do to try to fill that gap is to pursue things like our achievements or relationships or jobs or money or stuff. But the problem is there is no limit. There is no amount that is enough. If you go and ask the richest person in the world how much is enough, what are they going to tell you? Most likely they'll say just a little bit more. Or find someone who's at the top of their game and ask them, are you good? Are you done? Like, is this it? Is this where you want to be? And they'll probably say, No, it'd be nice to have another, to get another award. It'd be nice to be on top for a little bit longer. So not only do we do we try to fill it with distractions and pursuits, I think the other thing that we all do as humans is we try to outweigh the bad with more good. We try to fill that up by being a good person or doing good things. And being a good person and crossing our fingers and hoping that one day the good will outweigh the bad. But the problem with that kind of mentality is, what's the amount? Like, where does the good outweigh the bad? Actually, in fact, Paul, one of the first followers of Christ, even talked about this. And he mentioned that no matter what he does, even the greatest things he did, which, by the way, the stuff that Paul did, the way that he taught people to love, following what Jesus had said, it literally changed history. And yet he looked back at the things that he did and he said, everything I do is like filthy rags. It matters nothing. It cannot overcome the bad stuff that he had done. He also said that no matter who they are, he said, there is none who are righteous. There is no one who is completely right, who does it all right, save Christ. There is no one who does that. So it's funny, even somebody like him says, it's not enough on my own. What I do is worthless. It doesn't add up. And that can leave us in a pretty bad place. But see, the good news is what Jesus did filled that gap. And we're going to be talking about that over the next couple of weeks. But what Jesus did filled that gap. And I've got a story I want to share with you. Now, some of you have heard this story before, and I'm going to keep it short. But there was a time in my life that I lived in a neighborhood nearby the church. And it was a pretty low-income neighborhood. And while I was there, we started a tutoring program, a community program, which now it's called the House of Hope, and they now have 2 locations and 2 parks, and it's pretty awesome what Brooke and Alyssa and Austin are doing. But when I was there was some students that I had met in the neighborhood, and I got pretty close to them. And long story, very short, I had to pick up and leave in the middle of the night to go see a family member who was about ready to pass away, and I didn't tell them. And so the students thought I abandoned them. And while I was gone, I had heard somebody called me and said, hey, some kids in the park smashed out your windows. So I came home, I drove back across the country, came back home and found out like all of my windows, but like 4 were smashed. And my house was full of these rocks. And they had taken rocks from around my house and thrown them and smashed the windows in. And eventually I figured out who did it, and they confessed to doing it. And we had a conversation at one point, and I said, there is nothing you can do to fix these windows. You don't have any money. Your parents don't have any money. I don't have any money. And so I asked each student, what do we do? How do we fix these windows? And they were like, I don't know. They literally had no idea. I mean, some were really upset, and some tried to deny it then, and some were afraid maybe their parents would go to jail, which that wasn't going to happen. I'd live with no windows first before doing that. But someone from the church actually had volunteered to fix all of the windows. So the windows got fixed. They all got paid for. They all got fixed. And I got to take each of those students and sit them down and say, listen, I know you couldn't pay the price, but somebody else did. Somebody else paid the price to cover and fix your mistakes. And got to show them what forgiveness looked like. And forgiveness really is allowing someone to not have to pay for the thing that they owe. And if you fast forward a year later, there was one of the kids who he stopped coming over to my house because he felt so bad. And eventually, there was one morning I walked out and I saw him on my porch. He was just sitting there, and I went to talk to him, and he didn't really want to talk. He was just like looking down, and I asked him what was bothering him, and he pointed to the window behind him. He said, I did that. I broke them. I'm bad. And I said, you're not bad. You're forgiven. And so I went through and asked him all of the questions that I asked before. And I said, do you remember what I told you? And he said, yes, somebody paid for the windows. And I said, it's done. It's paid for. And I'm not mad at you. I forgave you. Like, I still care about you greatly. And after that, he started coming back around again. But he needed that reassurance. And I think sometimes that's what happens with us. See, Jesus has paid that price, but it's hard to live in that freedom. We feel like sometimes God is still separate from us because of the things that we do, when the reality is he's right there with us. When Jesus died, came back to life, when he paid for our sins and was resurrected, he removed the gap between us and God. He removes the barrier. So when God looks at us, he doesn't see us. He sees the goodness and the righteousness and the perfectness of Jesus. And actually, Jesus told us to look at him as if he was a father. And I wanted to take and get a couple of, I asked a couple of parents to tell me what they think about their student when they mess up.
Society and culture put a lot of emphasis on defining moments in people's lives, the good and the bad. And something I've learned in the last 5 years is that bad actions do not define a person or a student. And I've been living that way for quite a few years, and one of the initial things I have to do is think to myself, wow, I'm glad you may have done something wrong, but I'm glad that that's not going to define you for the rest of your life. You can always do the opposite. You can always do something different. You don't have to go in that direction that you made this bad choice. But one thing I think both my boys know is that we do make mistakes, but we are loved. And there's always an opportunity for us to maybe be in communication with somebody to make sure that things can be shared, worked on, be aware of, and maybe do something different, maybe change that direction, change that course. And
howdy, Edge Gang. Hope everyone's doing fine, staying safe and germ-free during this shutdown period. Miss everybody. Hey, just want to talk to you a little bit about how I respond to my kids when they mess up, which, as you know, my darling daughter Paige never messes up, so it's very rare that I have to respond, but let's just say she does. The first part is I want to make sure that they learn a lesson from their mistake. I like to make sure they understand what they did is wrong and why it's not acceptable. That's kind of the no-brainer part, right? And then if there is any type of punishment needed to reinforce that message, well, that may come along also. But then the second part, and maybe more important, is I want to make sure that they know that I still love them. And just because they messed up doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad or that our relationship will ever change or lessen. And that's kind of like with our relationship with God, right? No matter what we do, no matter how bad we screw up, God will always love us, no more, no less. So keep that in mind. We all sin, we all have problems, but God's there for us. Jesus died on the cross for our sins, so we will be forgiven. All we need to do is ask for forgiveness and accept Jesus.
God's not angry. He's not. He loves us. And because of what Jesus has done, we're free. And that separation is gone. Because of his death and resurrection, sin is defeated, separation is gone. So may we trust in what Jesus did for us. May we live how he lived. May we know that God does not hate us. He is not angry. He loves us like a father loves their kid. He forgives us. He's with us. And he calls us to do the same for others. So tune in this week. We got the show coming up. We got a couple of videos coming out this week. And make sure you comment in the comments and actually talk to your small group. Join one of the online conversations with your. And don't forget to join the online conversations with your small groups. Join in with your leaders, join in with your fellow students, and make sure you keep the conversation going about what this looks like in your life and in their life, and see how you can support them and they can support you.